All right, I got my brother from another mother, Freddie Kimmel, on the show today. He is a certified mind, body, health, wellness expert and an advocate and ambassador for multiple technology companies such as Ampcoil and Flowpresso. Freddie, welcome to the show, brother.
So good to be here.
Dude, you are one of my favorite people in the health and wellness space, just because of your background, your story, your energy, your love that you always show up and bring people. You have an amazing podcast, also the Beautifully Broken podcast. We've known each other for years. I've wanted to have you on the show for years. I just thought, oh, well, let's do it in person when we cross paths at a biohacking conference or something. And usually what happens is we're both way too busy. And so it doesn't happen. So I reached out. I was like, well, let's just make it happen, and we'll do an in-person one when it's right. But man, I know a lot about what you're up to. You have an amazing story for anybody who's ever suffered from Lyme, chronic disease, autoimmune, anything like that. They're going to want to hear your story because your story would almost think like it's hopeless and just give up already. And I think when anybody hears your story, damn, not only are they going to have hope, but you're the proof that not only you can have hope to win and beat whatever you're going through, but you can actually thrive. So I figured, dude, let's jump into, first of all, introduce yourself, because I didn't do it justice. You're so much more than what I said. Tell everybody kind of what you're doing now, and then let's jump into your story and how you got here.
Yeah. So I'm certified in functional medicine and biological medicine and international science as a movement specialist, gut health from University of Colorado. I could go on, and over the last 20 years, I've just continued to add on trainings and education, and most recently in lymphatics, and just everything I can understand about the body's systems that auto-regulate or help the body heal. I, like many other people, have a great pain to power storyo. I was in New York City it was 2001. I had moved to New York. I was going to be a Broadway performer. And really quickly, while I was setting down my bags and trying to find a job, I woke up one morning, full body rheumatoid arthritis. And this is a part of my story I don't talk about a lot. I usually start way further down the road.
And Freddie, really quick, you're like in your early 20s.
Yeah, I'm 23 at this time.
Yeah, 23-year-olds don't get rheumatoid arthritis, okay?
Yeah. I mean, that's what I thought. I was young and I was had this Superman mindset. I couldn't imagine that this was happening to me. And I'd went to a bunch of doctors. They had done labs. There's nothing wrong with my lab work. It was like, we don't know now this is funny because it was in the news. They're like, here's Plaquenil, here's hydroxychloroquine. And it did take the volume down on everything a little bit, and when that didn't work as well, they were like, here is indomethacin, and here's Celebrex, and whatever that doesn't do, just take the balance out in Advil. So from 23 to 26, while I'm in New York City, and by the way, I have to mention, I had an incredible meteoric, set down my bags, booked my first Broadway audition of Annie Get Your Gun, touring around the world for a full year and a half. I got my union card. I had booked just better role after better role. I'm working with the greats in New York City. You name it. I booked a show that was at the Kennedy Center. I was going to go sing for the president in 2006. I mean, it was amazing. At the same time, I have this dirty secret. All my joints hurt. And if I stop the Plaquenil and the indomethacin and the Celebrex and the Advil, it hurts to stand, hurts to hold a coffee cup. So I was masking this really loud voice that my body was like, dude, change something. And I was in amazing shape. Amazing. I have pictures that I was like, I had a 12-pack. I mean, it was insane. I was ripped. So eventually I started to get this pain in my testicle. I'm 26 years old. This is like 3 years of being chronically inflamed. And I went to a doctor, said, don't be too overly concerned. Pain in your testicle is normal. It could be an infection, could be a torsion, go get it looked at. And at 26, I was like, great. I don't have to do anything about it because I didn't like doctors. My dad didn't like doctors, didn't believe in. Yeah, I was like, I'm just too young to have anything seriously wrong. Eventually, one morning, I couldn't stand. Totally. So I went to a free clinic. They said, go to the ER because I didn't have health insurance. This will be covered. go to the ER, went to the ER, urology, went for an ultrasound, went for x-rays, finally woke up in this room, and this full team of doctors and med students walked in. Don't look at me. They turn their backs to me. They start putting my charts up the wall, and they just start talking about my charts. And they said, this is a male with advanced testicular cancer that is spread throughout his abdomen.
Oh
Dude,
my God.
oh my God. I still give myself goosebumps. I totally blacked out. I grabbed all my clothes. I ran out of the room and eventually just went straight to a cafeteria. I just found a trash can and just started to vomit, dry heave. And I picked up my phone and I just, dude, shaking, tried to call my dad. And this amazing story. My phone is like, dude. They're like, you have not paid your cell phone bill. Please call AT&T to have your cell phone service reactivated. And I called AT&T bawling, and I was like, I got this rap, and she was like, is what's the matter? I can't really understand you. I was crying. I'm like, somebody told me I have cancer. I got to call my dad. They turned on my phone because I did not have money in my bank account even to pay the bill. Long story short, I got on a plane. My dad was like, come home. I went to University of Rochester, and sure enough, I went right to the emergency room. I was in unbelievable pain. Everything in my abdomen would just hurt so bad. And I woke up to a surgeon standing over me. He's like pointing on the wall. He's like, Mr. Kimmel, hi. He's like, you do have testicular cancer. It has spread. There's a tumor here and here and here and here. And he just started to point like all over my abdomen, like a tumor surrounding my left kidney, the vena cava going to my heart.
Oh my God.
Same exact cancer as Lance Armstrong had. Same cell makeup, same progression. So if you know Lance's story, prior to him winning any of the Tour de France's, he was a great racer, but he was same thing. He had pushed through pain. He's like, I'm an athlete. I'm used to being sore. What's this? What's this pain? What's coughing up a little blood? His had progressed to his brain. And that's what testicular cancer does in young men. And if you think about it, the temperature in your testicle is your testicles drop to remain a little bit cooler environment. Once the cancer it gets into the body and it starts to really spread, so it goes testicle to lymph node to lung to brain, and it's a very short disease progression. So in the 70s or 50s or 60s, when you had testicular cancer, it was a death sentence because they didn't have agents to combat it. Now they have really great. Really great. I mean, in the 90th percentile to eradicate testicular cancer, there's a 2 chemotherapy regime called etoposide cisplatin. I think the other one's bleomycin, but I'm probably getting that wrong when it's in the lungs. And I will say this, the regimen is very fierce. So they're like, we're going to take out the initial tumor. We'll do as much chemo as your body can handle. That was 4 cycles. So you do a week, 5 hours a day. 2 weeks to recover, then you start it again. And I have pictures of myself, man. It was like, I'll send you some, because when I was done, I looked like E.T. when they pull E.T. out of the river at the end of the movie. He's just all white and shriveled, and I didn't look like the same body. Nothing. Yeah. All my muscle was gone. I was incredibly weak, incredibly the big thing is like we went in to do the follow-up scans, and after all the chemo, they said it was going to be gone. It wasn't gone. They still saw all these spots in my abdomen. And they're like, look, we've got to, unfortunately, we're going to have to open up your chest. We're going to cut from your pelvis to your top of your sternum up here. We're going to take out your small intestine, your bowel, and underneath that in your peritoneum is where all the tumors are. So we're going to spend about, however many hours it is to take out these tumors. We'll button you back up. It's called a retroperitoneal lymph node dissection, and it's a gnarly surgery. Any nurse will tell you it's one of the most challenging surgeries because there's so much trauma to the body and the digestive organs. And so that was, without going and making this story too long, they stitched me up, had a lot of complications. Body didn't want to turn back on. It was 10 days. It was 11 days in like an ICU without food or water. Just tubes down my throat, totally awake, just breathing through pain. waiting for the body to start reabsorbing fluids, waiting for the large intestine and small intestine to what's called an ileus. They basically fall asleep from the anesthesia and they don't wake back up because there's so much fluid and trauma from the surgery.
Wow.
That eventually cleared, and in 2007, middle of 2007, I had a bunch of my surgeon, my oncologist, everybody walked in my room with my family standing around my bed. They're like, Freddie, you're cancer free. There's no pathology left. You're good to go. And I tell people, like, this is in my brain, the part of the story where I was like going to call Oprah, where I would like be on television. I was going to go be on Saturday Night Live. I was going to go right back to be in a Broadway show, and I was going to be good. And that wasn't the route. You know, immediately after surgery and chemo, my small intestine started to twist and completely obstruct. And if you know what a small bowel obstruction is, it's essentially where scar tissue ties your small bowel in a knot. No food, no nothing can get by. Where the body is, that peristalsis is trying to move through food past. They say it's on the level of childbirth, like that pain. And I've never experienced any pain like that in my life to this day. It's blinding. You lay down on the floor and you just breathe. Lots of times I'd black out. You know, they'd bring me to the emergency room, and sometimes it would let go. I'd get an IV. But multiple times they'd be like, hey, we got to open your belly back up. So this is like 2011. I would just finish Billy Elliot, the Broadway tour. And, you know, I was singing and dancing and flipping over walls and tap dancing. And then I find myself in the emergency room where they'd open up my chest again, take out a foot of small bowel that was totally dead. They'd be like, hey, your bowel had died downstream of this obstruction. And so they'd stitch it back together. You know, 2015, they went in with lasers and just tried to snip a bunch of scar tissue, these adhesions. Terrible, terrible problem. In the middle of this, immune system crashes, profound chronic fatigue. You know, like anybody else, I'm digging, I'm flipping rocks. I'm like, why? I'm so tired. Every joint in my body, I still have their chronic rheumatoid arthritis, still have the pain. You know, we found Lyme disease. We found unbelievably high viral titers, you know, cytomegalovirus, HHV6, Epstein-Barr. Just, you know, imagine like a petri. I always say, imagine like a fish tank. You know, you have your beautiful fish tank. Mine was just like wrecked, full of mold, full of viruses, full of pathogens. And it was some part of that journey. I had walked in a doctor's office. I was like, I gotta figure something out. I can't live like this anymore. You know, you got to do something for me. What can we do? And one surgeon said, look, I'll be real honest with you. I wouldn't touch you with a 10-foot pole because you're a liability. The only thing that's going to happen from me trying to do more work on your gut is that I'll get sued, and you're under, it's my responsibility. He's like, it's too high of a risk. But when you go into the emergency room again, and you will, they'll just continue to remove small bowel, which if you know this camp of people, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of people that are completely on disability because of these adhesions, because it's a vicious cycle. Once you cut into the abdomen and you form the scar tissue, you know, imagine the flow of like digestive juices from the gallbladder or fluids from the liver, all obstructed in these tight scar tissue spider webs. So I pretty much had a point where I just dropped to my knees, and I really did. I was very poetic, very dramatic, like music theater. I was walking down a street past a monastery, and I just dropped to my knees. It's snowing. I'm like looking at a statue of an angel, crying through the worst brain fog. And I was like, oh my God, if I ever get better, if I ever do a place of functionality, I swear to God, the creator, I will be a person of service. I promise I will advocate for people. That's all I want. And I'm here with you today, and I'm super functional, and I can poop, and I can eat the food I want to eat. And I live an extremely vibrant life. I travel all over the world. I speak to people and advocate for health. I'm totally retired from music theater, but I'm an advocate for the path that I walked through, and which was the stuff that you and I love. It's the stuff like using electrical stim to re-educate muscles. It's stuff like PEMF, like Ampcoil. It's stuff like lymphatic drainage, like Flowpresso. It's red light therapy for scar tissue. It's hyperbaric chambers. and most of all, it's living in alignment with nature, which I had to do all these things, right? But I had some massive turning points in my level of, again, these emergency room visits. When I found Ampcoil, it was once a month where I'd be on the floor puking for a day, 2 days, and I could never get momentum. But my poor little, whenever I tell this story, I was like, God, my poor little nervous system. How do you not be in a state of fear?
Yeah.
And I really had to accept and own the fact that I was going to be what I was going to be. I might not get better. I might have to always do a coffee enema or an enema to go to the bathroom. And I had to accept that. I really did. And then I just had to say, well, I'll take 1%. I'll be okay with 1% tomorrow. Can I take one step towards where I want to be? And I just kept doing that. And through a lot of luck and a lot of faith and some amazing, amazing technology advancements, I'm sitting here in front of you today. And right now in my body, I have no pain in my abdomen. None. It's a 0 out of 10.
And they said
And
you'd be having surgery like every month, basically, and all they'd be doing is removing pieces of your bowel until you died. And here you are.
I've had 6 altogether, all the surgery, 7 really. If I look at every procedure I had, I would be having these bouts of like partial obstructions every month. Yeah, it was wild. And it's a good point to stop, because there's so many things that I did, but I had some huge turnarounds with the tech that you and I are huge advocates for.
Yeah. I want to get into the tech, but a couple of things I want to ask you.
Yeah.
Based on this, because you're a guy I know who knows a lot about health, because you had to, actually. I mean, you actually didn't have to, but you chose to go down the path that not everyone would go down, because you wanted to know more and know more. And I think you and I are very similar in that. It's like, okay, I learned this, but I didn't realize this. Like you're talking about the lymphatic system. I'm blown away about the lymphatic system, how little I think we know and how much it actually does. Everybody talks about the circulatory system. Nobody talks about the lymphatic. So that's just one point. But I wanted to ask you, because knowing everything you know now about health, and 10 years from now, your ideas will change, but knowing everything you know now, if you were to get diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis now or testicular cancer, what would be your response? What would you do first? What would you prioritize? Would you go to the Western doctor and he's like, sorry, Freddie, we got to do chemo? Would you be like, actually, I don't think that's true. I think there's something else I would do. I'm curious how you would look at health now, knowing everything you know.
Yeah, I think and I'm bipartisan in this view of health. I would take everything that the West had to offer. I would take everything that complementary medicine had to offer, and I would use all those tools in the toolbox, and I would make an assessment on what the data actually said. What is the value of, let's just say let's say I had a solid tumor that I was going to do radiation and chemotherapy for. What is the dose that I need? Is the dose dependent on like my body's insulin sensitivity? Is it dependent on like how quickly my body can recover, i.e. my utilization of oxygen or the nutraceuticals circulating through my circulatory system? Can I add in things like mistletoe injections? Can I add in things like spot treatment hyperthermia to increase the temperature of that solid tumor? So just like a chemical reaction in a lab, if I change the temperature of the tissue, I change the time at which the chemical reaction happens, or the place. So I can change the blood supply to that tumor with things. That's one example. So I would use everything, but I would do I would talk to my people. I would talk to Dr. Nasha. I would talk to Dr. Connolly. I would ask everybody that I could get a hold of in my little inner circle, and I would ask their really raw, honest opinion on what are going to be the things that are going to set me up for success. I would try to remove my bias,
Yeah.
because Joel, I'll be real honest with you. I have plenty of friends in our inner circle that have said, you know what, I don't need anything else other than frequency medicine and PEMF, and I've watched
that was what I was
pass
thinking
away.
you might say, Freddie, because on the highest level of everything is frequency and sound. That makes, actually, I believe in that. I think that makes sense.
I do.
But I wonder for myself if I was diagnosed today, and I'm ahead of the curve in the sense that, you know, in our 20s, I didn't have available. I didn't even know this tech existed.
Yeah.
Now, 20 years later, I know it exists, and so I would probably lean more on that. But I also know there'd be a tremendous fear spike if my kid was diagnosed or I was diagnosed. Death is on. Death is hanging, and you've never felt that unless you felt that. And I don't know if I would be like, oh yeah, functional medicine, sound frequency. Like in my head, I would believe it, but I don't know if I would believe it. And so that's why I ask you, like, would you just rely on that, knowing that it does work and you're proof of it? Or because I always do look at it that way too, Freddie, is that, hey, cancer, right? We know cancer is always around us. There's always cancer cells forming.
Every day.
It's just a matter of overgrowth and when they go rogue. So I believe that and know that. But again, could I? So my whole point is bring the body back into balance, which I do believe in. And when the body is balanced and has the right input, it'll heal on its own. I truly believe that. But again, I don't know if I got that death sentence. You got testicular cancer, Joel. It's going up to your brain. Oh, you're not going to do chemo? You think you're that brave? I don't know, man. That's why I'm asking you. Like, what do you think, you know?
Yeah, 100%. And I would just say, you know, my story is that cancer was remediated. You know, the tumors were burnt down to like a little marshmallow crisp, which that tumor responds very well to the two drugs I did, etoposide and cisplatin. And then surgery took me the last way for the cancer. You know, the like a military effort going into a country and turning it into a whole, right? That's where Western medicine is not good. Like when you're done, you're done. You know, no one necessarily.
Chemo is literally poison. It's just poisoning the entire body. Like we're going to kill the cancer and everything and anything around it. Nuclear bomb, right? Is that how you describe it?
Yeah. And I think we'll go back one day and I'll think, I think we'll really, I think it will feel archaic. Now we're just not there yet. But there are people, like I mentioned, there are people using, they're manipulating the way a tumor responds to the medicine, so we can change insulin response. You know, there's good evidentiary proof to say fasting for 24 to 48 hours prior to chemotherapy or radiation is protective to the cells in the environment. There's so much out there, you know, so I would just take every little bit of extra that I could, but I definitively would not throw away some of those regimes, because even though it's hard on the body, again, it's so personal, Joel. It's like the way I am now, like all the resources I had, I'm so much stronger and so much more fit metabolically than I was when I was 26.
Yeah.
Hands down. I'm 46 now. So I just wouldn't, I would have to make an assessment on my body. But if you said I'm a standard American with a standard American diet and I can't touch my toes and I never sleep and I'm not outside and my oxygenation is terrible because I'm a mouth breather, on and on and on, I'd be like, I don't know. You know, I would have to guide that person and say, look, let's take a strong assessment. Now, there are people out there that do that, like Dr. Katie Deming. You know, Katie was in charge of, again, you should look up Dr. Katie Deming, holistic oncologist, but she was incredibly Western, and she was so disenchanted with the results she was seeing. And she's like, I know there's more. I know that this conversation that we're having, and they're like, what are the lifestyle things that are going to impact metabolic function? Because if we're really looking at cancer, we're looking at the cell has changed its type of metabolism to thrive in an oxygen low, sugar rich environment. So why wouldn't I change the terrain? Cancer does not happen overnight. They prove that again and again and again. You know, that's the hard thing to say. You know, can I just rebalance the body? Well, if this tumor was growing for 10 years based on your lifestyle, 5 years, why do you think you can just use sound therapy now and nutraceuticals to mitigate this tumor? I'm not sure that's realistic. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, because it does. There's great books out there, like one called Radical Remission, where they look at the guy that was a doctor who tried to disprove all these cases of people having stage 4 cancer where it's just gone. And he was like, finally got into 20 case studies, like, this is real. But these are outliers, extreme outliers in the bell curve, which we will always have. But he's like, what did they change? They changed their diet. They removed themselves from their stressful environment. They changed their perspective, their understanding of interrelating with the outside world. And they also did, dot, 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 dot. So there's a lot to the conversation. And what I realize when we have these conversations, most people they're not in the shared reality that you do have these self-regulatory systems in the body that can help the body heal and recover, like lymph, like a functioning immune system, like muscle mass, like glymphatic drainage. Is your drainage system within your brain compromised? Is the cellular waste, which is in your brain, piling up year after year after year? That's certainly the case in these neurodegenerative conditions. We can see that on imaging. We can see where there's so much gunk in the brain that the signal just starts to slow down from the body's supercomputer sending out commands to the organs. So there's more to it that we just, again, and most people are not of this belief system. So it's a steep learning curve. When you walk into a doctor's office and you're like, hey, look at this. What are you going to do? You're probably going to go with the emergency medicine because in some ways you are in an emergency situation. It's late stage disease. So again, I think the things that we're doing now are very valuable. I would love it if more was brought into the conversation around lifestyle and what is that person? What do you have? What can you take ownership of? But that conversation is not had. Again, I understand it, but I'd love to see that change.
Yeah. Wow. So much
Yeah,
good stuff.
so much.
Talk to me about Ampcoil. I'm a huge fan of it. I when I was doing my own research several years ago, I was looking for a device that I wanted some protection for my family. Freddie, is what I wanted, and this is pre-pandemic. I think I got an Ampcoil around 2019. Actually, I was looking at 2018, 2019, and I wanted a device. And like you, I go to all the biohacking stuff, and there was a PEMF device there called the Pulse Centers. And I go, oh, this is a really good one too, reputable brand. And I was looking at between the two of them, and I ended up going with Ampcoil because I just felt like, I don't know, the idea of PEMF, the PEMF I thought was great with Pulse Centers, but it's like only specific frequencies I think you can do. You can't. Whereas Ampcoil, there's several journeys, meaning you can bring your body back into. You can't just run one frequency or two or let's say 10 frequencies, which I believe at the time was Pulse Centers. Maybe it still is. I don't remember. But with Ampcoil, it made more sense to me that it uses PEMF and sound therapy. And there was a lot at the time that I was looking at with like Nikola Tesla and Rife and how they were using hertz and frequency to destroy cancer. And they had this all in their lab. And then, of course, the FBI, CIA, whoever destroyed all their stuff. So, there's disciples of these people that we still hear about. But
yeah,
I just thought that made more sense to me, and that I liked the idea of being able to like bring the terrain back. And I thought, I don't know where I'm going to end up in the world, but if my kid's cancer or something comes out, this Ampcoil, this tool, this can be a tool that I feel safe, that I can provide my family with, my boys. And I can probably, I don't want to say I was invincible, but I just had the idea I could probably beat anything more or less super severe with this device. And that was why I ended up going with them. And that's kind of how I started learning more about you and all that stuff. But talk to me about your journey with Ampcoil and what you love about it. And for people that don't know about it, describe it a little bit.
Yeah, I think, there's so many things to like just say the difference, right? There's PEMF, there's a PEMF device like Pulse Centers or MagnaWave or Aura Wellness, which generates an electromagnetic wave usually on a single frequency. Some have another frequency running in the background. And I mean a frequency, we can think of like how frequently the wave travels from tip to trough, right? How many pulses per second? So 50 hertz, 60 hertz. We are saying that electromagnetic wave stimulates or encourages the recovery of the cell. Now, this is a pulsed PEMF is a technology that is certified by the FDA for healing non-union bone fractures, meaning the bone has fractured and it's failed to come back together. The osteoblasts have failed to grow back together. What they've seen is that when we apply a strong enough waveform to those fractures, that the body starts to regrow bone. And it's not that the device is doing it. It's a signaling method. It's actually increasing the voltage or the transmembrane potential. I know that's a big word for audience, but
I love it. Go, Freddie, go.
every cell is a battery, right?
Yeah.
Every cell is a battery. I'm not asking the audience to say, right, yes, we know. I'm going to explain it. It's just like a battery. So there's a net negative charge on the outside of the cell. There's like little positives and negatives on the outside. There's little positives and negatives on the inside, but there's a net negative on the outside, net positive on the inside. If you look at a red blood cell, which is just an example, the net negative on the outside allows the little blood cells to repel each other. It helps with movement as they travel through the circulatory system. It also helps with that gradient. Transmembrane potential is the gradient between the outside and the inside. So ion channels, sodium, ions, and nutrients are allowed to flow in and out of the cell. The cell can dump garbage. It can make more energy as a result of this membrane potential being higher. And then in a non-union fracture, the cells that are not doing their job to repattern these bones, just like Wolverine. If you haven't seen Deadpool and Wolverine, it's so good. Watch it this weekend. It's so fun. It starts to regrow. It's incredible, this tech. So that was my first thing. I was like, are you kidding me? Why isn't this in an emergency room?
Yeah.
Why isn't this in now? Since you and I have been, talking about this, now it is. Now the devices are, now there are models that are FDA approved that are more and more. So this has come, Aura Wellness is one that went through FDA. And this is going to be something that a company finally took enough time to do the research and show efficacy, and safety is the big thing, Joel. The other place that got me stoked about this, all the Kentucky Derby horses are using these after a race. Do you think horses have a placebo?
Right.
Have you ever seen a racehorse that comes off the Kentucky Derby? I mean, dude, they're wrecked. It's very hard on the horses, and this, a lot of times horses will just have a little, they'll tear a tendon, they'll fracture, and what do they do with the horse? They kill the horse. So this is something where this technology, after all these horses are, these multi-million-dollar racehorses are going back to get PEMF, and immediately you can see a horse with a limp, all of a sudden its gait normalizes, right after the race. This is something that's been known for years and years and years, and horses work a lot like people. The only difference is the horse has no attachment to whether this is going to work or not work. It just works. Dogs, animals, farm animals. So this is a big thing the company MagnaWave does with farm animals. So I started to do my research. The difference with Ampcoil is that Ampcoil is taking sound like a song, like a one-note song. So it'd be do, 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 do. It's taking that audio frequency and translating it into an electromagnetic wave. So an audible 60 hertz is now silent through the coil. Some of the sounds you can actually hear when you hold the coil up to your head. And what they're doing is it's more nuanced, and we're using a frequency to try to rebalance a disruption in the body. So there will be sessions on Ampcoil which are going to help the nervous system, sessions that are going to help sleep, sessions that are going to help pain. And I don't say that as a claim. I mean, the song is written to complement that state of being, and that is what is reported from those users, be it using things like heart rate variability or using things like deep sleep times, all the different metrics that we can measure within the body. I've looked at a lot of thermography scans, which would look at side-by-side temperature comparisons within the body to look at patterns of inflammation or heat. Especially the things like the rejuvenating or the restorative sessions on Ampcoil, like Harmonizer or Balance the Mind or nutrition. You can see a change in heat patterns. You see a change in heat patterns in those thermography images. So I've looked at enough things pre and post and had, not me, but had a doctor, the president of the Thermography Association, look at and tell me what these mean again and again and again. And I was like, okay, there's a lot of legitimacy here. So when I got Ampcoil, I was really looking for, I had bought a house at the end of my journey, which I don't talk about all the things because it sounds ridiculous, like I'm making it up, but I bought a house with black mold in it, floor to ceiling, and one of the walls. I opened up the drywall. I was standing there, this big cloud of mold came out. And I started to get almost like Alzheimer's like symptoms. Like I was forgetting words on stage when I was play that I had been in for 17 months. Couldn't remember the lines coming out. These micro little Alzheimer's moments.
Mm.
And I was scared because all my symptoms started to have the volume started to go up again, and I was fasting, I was eating elite nutrition, I had an ozone machine, I was doing lots of stuff that's very outside of the box. And I had seen a YouTube video on Ampcoil, and it just spoke to me. I was like, that sounds amazing. This has got to be real. And so I started to find the evidentiary proof on the non-union fractures. And I was like, well, if it's just helping a cell to do what the cell needs to do, why wouldn't that help me? Why wouldn't it help me? It doesn't matter what I have. I want to focus on healthy cells. There's lots of other pieces of the picture, but I want to focus on healthy cells. And for me, the adhesions that would twist, a lot of times I could get the coil in my belly and I could feel it go, 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 and it would open. Like the obstruction would open and really quickly. Might take 2 hours as opposed to 48 hours. So I started to see this really be a massive shift in the way my body was responding to scar tissue. Now, whether that was a trauma response or a memory or is functioning on the actual scar tissue, I was not in the belly, but it was a huge, and it allowed me to have enough breaks in those partial obstructions where I wasn't in a constant state of PTSD, where I wasn't in chronic pain all the time. And that really gave me runway to start to add in other things. And it was a huge turning point for me. Huge.
Wow. Speaking of just labs and stuff and going side by side, I remember you posting, and I think it was in the Ampcoil community group.
Mm-hmm.
I think you had posted something that you had showed Dr. Cabral, if I remember the post. And it was, you had ran Detox Assist, I think, was the
Mm-hmm.
protocol
Mm-hmm.
or something. And there was like I think he even said to you, I think that was what you had said in the post, that even he said, like, wow. Right? Like, because Dr. Cabral, I've heard people don't know, he's like a big time naturopathic doctor, coaches and trains other people to become coaches, like, and help people in a holistic way. He was very, very sick as a young kid, and he does a lot of naturopathic methodologies to get people better. And he
Mm-hmm.
has his own system. But I think, is that right? Is that the one that I'm thinking of, Freddie? And he was
I did a couple.
wow.
I had done a mycotoxin panel where I had measured the mycotoxin, which is the biological off-gassing of mold, I guess. Like mold is alive, can be alive in the body, in the nasal passages, can be in the gut. And my levels were very, very high in what my body was releasing. And then I had done a bunch of work with Ampcoil, a bunch of 6-7 months of pulse electromagnetic field, and I had watched, and then I got my other test back, and all the levels were normal. All the levels. It was incredible. And I
So you didn't
felt
add
better.
binders, you didn't do anything else. You just did Ampcoil.
Not really. No, binders have always wrecked me, which is I've just started to. What a journey about the conversation around binder, the idea that we can have a charged particle to bind, form a covalent bond with some sort of environmental toxin and help pull it out of the body. The again, to create a shared reality with audience members at the home, when a child gets into a cabinet in your kitchen and they eat whatever's under the sink and they're rushed to the emergency room, they will pump the belly full of charcoal. Charcoal is a binder to bind to all the toxicants, try to allow it not to be absorbed into the bloodstream. In our world, they're a little more educated, so they have particles with a better charge, like zeolite clays or humic and fulvic acids from the Cellular company, whatever you want to get into. But typically in the past, when I had taken binders, I had gotten so sick. It took my symptoms of brain fog and fatigue and 10x'd it. It would make it so bad, because what was happening was, if you think about this, and if the body's full of toxins, if I've got all these compromised pathways from the surgery and my lymphatic system, if I've got lots of intoxicants, I have really high levels of platinum from the cisplatin in my body, chemotherapy agents still. And so when I would pull toxins, it basically like a big pile of magnet filings. If I drag a magnet over the middle, the magnet's going to pick up a bunch, but it's going to draw a lot of the other filings into the center. And so I was having a really bad exacerbated symptom. So it was always, I couldn't really find, I've just started to find one that's really been profound for me in the last literally month, which is a very different concept and a much higher dose, but it was just really doing Ampcoil. I mean, and again, there was not a lot of other things I was adding. And then Dr. Cabral had run an envirotox panel. So he wanted to see things like, this is a great example of there's some really wild chemicals that are in like the rubberized floors that they're putting in community playgrounds now for
Oh,
kids.
wow.
I know, or gym floors, the squishy rubber floors. They off
Yeah.
gas for years and years and years. Lots
Oh,
of.
great. Oh, great.
So he would always say, he's like, look, he's like the levels of toxicants in just, in a healthy child that he sees are really wild off the charts. And I had done an envirotox. He was like, dude, he's like, there's nothing, like every single thing was like clean. He's like, I don't see this, period.
Wow.
So that was a new, I felt better, but then I had this other way to have a little snapshot in the body. Now, to our pre-podcast discussion, the body is only going to let go of things when it wants to, when it feels safe. My mentor, Dr. Tom, Dr. Drobot, everybody shares this belief system. It's like, and I've seen this again and again and again. I can't remember the name. Jeffrey Hoyt talks about this. There's a really powerful chelator from mercury that they'll use in coal miners. And even with this powerful chelator, sometimes the levels do not change. The body is not willing. It's not willing to let go. The body's going to take a toxicant. It's going to put it somewhere very intuitively that it's not going to harm the heart. So it's going to put it into the fat. It's going to put it into tissues. Another fatty tissue is your brain. It's going to put it somewhere where it's not going to directly affect your most vital. We need the heart, circulatory system. So a lot of times our blood work looks okay, but we don't feel good. And that's because the body is doing the best that it can to take these junk car parts that we would normally be used for metabolic function. It's going to park them somewhere. And that's again, there's so much conversation that needs to happen around this. It's like, why does the body hold these things? It's a smart body. If we look at it, again, I'm a big person. It's like, it's all a miracle or none of it is. So it's like cancer or chronic illness or the whisper of illness or chronic pain. I can't cherry pick what I think is good and bad. Or I think it's you really create this roller coaster ride in which you're like, man, God doesn't like me this week. He's being real hard on me. I wish he wouldn't have given me this. As opposed to saying, look, if I look back at my story and the surgeries and cancer and Lyme and mold and all the things that are horrible, that when I was a young kid, if you told me I was going to have these things, you told me I was going to be dealing with it for over 20 years, I don't think my psyche could have taken that. However, the fact that I look at it, that me moving through these things, living through them and being on the other side and being highly functional today, again, I still have stuff, believe me, that I still work on. I will always be working on my health. But the fact that I've moved through it and I'm at where I'm at today, it's a superpower for me because now I can speak from experience, not just what the literature says, because there's a big gap there. The one thing that always frustrated me with the journey is that there was no empathy, from most of the practitioners. Even today, it's so rare that you have empathy. I was like, oh, I wish I could snap my fingers and let you feel, like, oh, your labs look fine, or, your hormone levels are a little off, but I think it's okay. And I was like, I wish I could snap my fingers. I wish I could have you live with this for 2 hours. I would love to have you sit down and be like, oh, your tendons are on fire in your hamstring attachments, or that you feel like food can't move past a spot in your small intestine. I would love for you to see how quickly you would get off your ass and get better education for people like me. And again, I took that frustration and I had to turn it into medicine, or I was always going to be in that victim mentality. I was always going to, I would still be very, very frustrated and sad and angry. I had to transmute it.
Yeah. Wow. So good. I'm looking at the time and I want to talk about lymphatics with you, but I'm thinking we probably won't have too much time. So maybe I'll just shelf that for like a round 2 with you, because I'd love to bring you back on and geek out on lymphatics and what you learned, but maybe we'll talk about it a little bit. I want to kind of tie the bow on Ampcoil, or at least talk a little bit more about Ampcoil. And if we have some time, maybe we can freshen up on lymphatics just briefly, or just at least I'd love to hear why you're so passionate about it. But before I do, Ampcoil too, for people that don't understand. So most people that I've seen, the Lyme community is big on Ampcoil. From what I've
Mm-hmm.
seen, I never had Lyme, but most people users are Lyme users, and the reason is because Ampcoil gets some of the best results in the Lyme community. So a lot of people will go there. So anyways, who's listening, I'd say check it out. It's also really neat because you can do what's called a voice print on the Ampcoil. So
Mm-hmm.
you literally and the way I look at it now, it is freakishly accurate. Okay. I have had muscle testers work on me. I have done other energy scans and then gone to the Ampcoil and tested it. I've done naturopathic testing through hair tissue mineral analysis and then gone back and done a biofeedback scan. And I'm not going to say it. That crap was freakishly accurate. I was like, whoa. I was like, get the F out of here. Like, so what it is, guys, is you'll talk into the tablet and you'll say ABC and you do this sequence that they ask you to do. And then it'll come back and tell you what organs are in balance, what you need to do for nutrition, what cleanses you need to do, and what are the top microbes or toxins that are in your body, and what is the primary thing that you need to focus on. And I think that is really cool. And I just would want to share that with anybody. I don't know if you would add anything, Freddie, to that as well.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So it's again, this is where you have two sides of a camp that are going to have wildly different belief systems, because from a person seeking health, it sounds so out there and so wild. And I would just say my voice, right? There's information in the voice. We can always tell that. I can tell when somebody's down, when they're low, when they're lying, when they're sad, when they're happy. And there's experts, especially in your field, that can listen to a voice and be like, tell me more about that. You don't, there's all the nuance. So it's like, the weight of my tissue, how I'm feeling that day, my energetic levels, how I slept, there's information in the voice. And there's a spectrum which the human voice speaks in. So the idea with recording the voice and getting information, let's just say a computer listened to a voice for 55 seconds and it's looking for a hint. It's like, how many times did, well, I'm just going to use 8 notes. How many times did this note come in? Again? Oh, it's again, it's again, it's again, and again. After you're saying the alphabet and speaking. And if you get enough hits on this one note, the algorithm is saying, oh, look at minerals. Oh, look at liver. Oh, look at emotional, and it's pattern recognition. That's it. Now, again, just to bring it into, I would love to create a shared reality. There's a test that they've done to identify COVID through a voice print that's been, I think it's like 98% accurate. I believe the test is out of Israel. It's been so long since COVID-19 detection through means of an ECG, voice, and X-ray. So they've been trying to look at different ways to take an audio pattern of a body and create a baseline, and then identify if you do or don't have a pathogen within the system. There are people doing this. There's lie. It's not so dissimilar from lie detection. It's sort of in that world, and there's great people. There was a company called Sonify that was doing amazing work around this. I happen to know that they're working on an app based on the voice for the NFL to identify concussions. There's application out there. So
Very cool.
whether or not you find validity in it, I promise you this will be a thing. It's not perfect. It's not diagnostic, but it's information to point you in the direction. Be like, hey, here's something to look at. So I really like looking at it like that. And as you and I both have said, it's like, God, there's so many things I could do to my health. Where do I go? So to have information from your own body via some type of a feedback loop, I think is helpful.
So
I
good.
think
Yeah, it gives you a roadmap, man.
gives you somewhat of a roadmap. I wouldn't, again, I wouldn't I would never look at, I don't look at blood work this way. Blood work is a snapshot in time. I
Mm-hmm.
tell people, don't get over attached to your labs because it's just a snapshot in time. Again, I would look at the same thing from a bioenergetic feedback, from even an energetic in EKG or an ECG. I wouldn't get over attached to those signals because it's just a snapshot in time. It's like, what do you do with the whole picture? Again, but I think I think it'll be a big thing. I think we'll look at if we could get it efficient and we could make it work for the medical system, imagine the time you could save by doing something like that, as opposed to drawing blood, puncturing the skin, sending away to a lab. It really, it gives people greater accessibility at a much better cost. So I think it will be a thing. Again, some of the stuff that I've done and tried in the past, I'm almost, my bias is that I understand how easy it is to dissuade people in this world of like, oh, that's total woo woo, that there's no science, it's not valid. But I've seen it be valuable for people and myself. And again, I think it's something that in the next few years, once the NFL or once one of these big, multi-billion-dollar corporations adopts it as valid, I think the conversation will open up and we'll be able to have that talk.
It's all about results. That's what I always say. You can put your feelings and philosophies away. We're talking about results. There's thousands of Ampcoil users. You're N of one. You're proof. Like, I would say, go out and try it. If you get results, you got the Western doc saying, I can't fix you. You're a liability. You'll never be fixed. That's it. Deal with it, buddy. You'll probably be dead in a couple of years because you're just going to be removing your bowel. Ampcoil was a solution at the time that saved your life. So I don't care about all that stuff. The woo woo. Does it work? If it works, it works. That's what I love. Talk to me about, they've got a new PEMF mat and they're doing some stuff with Ampcoil that's 30% stronger, I believe, the coil. And I guess it's a big upgrade because times have changed, frequencies have changed, the world is changing. And so it's been, talk about that a little bit if you can.
Yeah, I would say, basically what the company has done, they've done a big software update and they've, again, because of, look at the health score, America to Cuba. I think we're behind Cuba. We're number 65 or 64. So we're just failing there so poorly. So many people, obviously we went through the pandemic. There's more chronic illness than ever. We're dealing with a lot of unique stuff, a lot of chronic inflammation. And so the idea of creating that electromagnetic wave and making it a little more robust was something they wanted to rebalance all the journeys for and give people that option. So they came out with a version 8, which has it's version 8 superpower. So you can use the software that originally was on the tablet, or you could opt up for the superpower, which boosts the magnetic resonance. Think about that. Basically what you're looking at, deeper penetration of the field, more of the body is enveloped in the electromagnetic wave. So you're exposing the cell to that electromagnetic wave that's stimulating or encouraging the recovery of the cell. And then people have the option to, now there's a PEMF mat. So there's a mat with 6 coils in it. And normally the Ampcoil is 1 coil that you set in your body, like a modified Tesla coil. And so now you can lay on a mat with 6 coils, and the same power that goes into the original coil is distributed among the 6. So now you can lay on the mat, the whole body gets the PEMF, and then you're holding the coil. So you're creating like this PEMF pancake, and the body is just enveloped in this electromagnetic signal, boosting circulation, right? Helping to reduce pain, helping to add energy to the cells so the body can do this self-correction process that we know it's capable of.
Yeah, that's so cool. What have been the results so far, or the feedback from people using the mat? Have you seen just, I don't want to say miraculous results, but just, have you heard a lot of good feedback from people saying like, wow, like I didn't notice this before, and now.
Yeah, there's a woman with a neurodegenerative condition. Her testimonial sits out in my mind. She's used the new software as well as the mat, and she was using it before. She was getting okay results. And her first experience was she has an oxygen tank that she has to be on to carry around. Might have had like some degree of COPD, and she said all of a sudden she was like, I went to the bathroom a couple times up and down the stairs in my 2-floor house. It didn't need my tank. And we're getting people sending us testimonials like that. And yeah, it is cool. It is cool. It is cool. And so I think it's across the board, it's been celebrated. Everybody has a different experience, but we've had some wild testimonials coming in with the software update and people using the mat. Again, we mentioned some of the devices on the market. They can be upwards of $55,000, $60,000. I'm not totally sure of what the Ampcoil all-in with the Ampcoil 3.0, which is 12 pounds, very portable, with the mat and the adapter to run both things at once. It's under 10 grand.
Yeah.
And like you said, there's thousands of users at this point. There's over 4,000 Ampcoil users across the world. The company's been around for over 7 years. Like that's the magic track record, you know, for kind of staying time. So it's a great system. You know, I think it's got a really, really strong community.
Yeah.
People love it. People are always like, "Oh my goodness, you know, I use it. I was so sick and I use it and I'm great." And then they'll come back on, they'll come into a community call and they'll be like, "I haven't used it in a while. I haven't needed it, but I want to get back into it. Tell me about the update. Tell me about the mat." So it's been really nice to see people. It was a long awaited for update. So now it's downloadable. It's so easy to do. If you have an Ampcoil, you can update it in 10 minutes. And then this also opens the door, you know, to other updates that will just be a soft, like you'll just touch a button, it'll automatically update. So it was a big overhaul to the app, which is, you know, Ampcoil, again, yes, it's a PEMF device, is a coil, but the proprietary software is really what makes that's magical. That's proprietary to Ampcoil. It's the frequencies in a specific order, amplitude, and duration that give the experience of relax all or balance the mind or harmonizer or pain relief, things like that.
Yeah, it's so cool. I was very impressed that, you know, I got the email that I could just update the software and I get 30% more increase in the coil. I thought that was so neat that I wasn't going to have to go out and buy version 3.0 or the next one to get a stronger coil. No, you just update the software. I was like, that is so cool. That made me really happy about Ampcoil.
It was, believe me, it's a, you know, to their testament, everybody in Ampcoil, they care as much about their users as they do their own family. I've watched people, you know, sacrifice time and money and heartache just to make everything as good as it possibly can be. And that's rare. You know, I'd say from a company standpoint, you know, it's not a great business decision to engineer every device that's ever been made up to the new version, because Tesla doesn't do that. Frigidaire doesn't do that. You know, they don't do it. So again, the heart is evident in the work and the product they put out. They've always been that way. You know, that'll be one reason I always stand by Ampcoil. And I'm telling you, as a consultant to tech companies, that is not always the way. It is a very capitalist driven world. And this is one area, this is one group of people that they operate on a different bandwidth. Their mission is to make an impact in people struggling and suffering with chronic illness. And it's a really, really beautiful community.
The vibe I've always gotten with Ampcoil is like it's family. That's always the vibe I've had. You've got amazing people like yourself in there that are spearheading a lot of the training and are in the group and are active. They're answering questions. Lori Marcus is one of my favorites. Anytime I reach out to her, she calls me within, I swear, minutes. And I just love that. So yeah, couldn't say enough good things about Ampcoil. Man, I'm looking at the time. I know we got to wrap it up. Can we do a round 2 on lymphatics and just
Of
I'd
course.
love to actually just pick your brain about health, the universe, lymphatics, and just other exciting things that you're working on, which I'd love to hear more about, and just things that are exciting you in the health, wellness, and just spiritual space, because I want to hear all about that more. Let's do a round 2.
Let's do it.
For right now, just tell everybody where they can find you, connect with you, learn more about all the things you're doing on social media. Like I mentioned earlier, right when we jumped on, you have an amazing podcast where you interview a lot of health experts and mindset and spiritual folks. So the Beautifully Broken podcast. But yeah, let everybody know where they can find you, Freddie. And then Ampcoil is ampcoil.com, I believe. I don't think there's anything else to say about that.
Yeah, ampcoil.com. You can go check it out. And there's a bunch of podcasts that I've done on Ampcoil. It's the Beautifully Broken podcast, which is just like you, Joel. I'm just interviewing people that are making an impact in the world. I interview a lot of survivors, a lot of incredible survivor stories, people that have been through, military vets that have been through stage 4 glioblastoma that should not be alive, that are alive, that had months to live and 2 and 3 years out. Really just, again, next level human beings that are defying what should be possible, and people who are willing to challenge the norm. You know, I even within within the institution of Western medicine, Dr. Nasha, Katie Deming, these are people that have, naturopaths, they're doctors, they're oncologists in charge of basically the United States oncology program, which are throwing up their hands and they're saying, what we're doing is not working. We need to have a deeper look at how we can empower these patients for better outcomes. We can't just allow this to be a business. So we're just having those conversations. So I'm laughing at myself because it was like, what, I don't have a book. I don't have a course. You can't work with me. It's like, but I get a lot from having these conversations. It's always been a process of evolving, like my North Star. It's like, where am I going? Where am I pointing myself to make the most impact? And I really like the long form conversations. We're not forced into a soundbite. We can tell a little bit of the nuance in the story. You're never going to get, you're not going to be able to go to Ampcoil.com and be like, oh, what is it? What happened to what did this impact look like in Freddie's life? Well, it was a total turnaround for me. Massive. I mean, I can look at all the tech. My biggest turnaround by far was from Ampcoil.
Wow.
Biggest. There's been amazing things that I've used and I do, but I have to, I wouldn't be doing a podcast. I wouldn't be here, wouldn't be speaking on stage, I wouldn't be doing anything that I'm doing without, first of all, the tech, but really, again, I'll go back to this. It's the family and it's that universe, that ecosystem that is just, they've always showed up in a very selfless way to try to ease the unnecessary suffering. And again, we just said, it was like, is the suffering unnecessary? No, it's probably necessary. And there's a beautiful group of people out there trying to give people education and tools in a different way through, which really, really resonates with me to this day.
Yeah, dude, love that. Freddie Kimmel, man, thank you, brother, for being on the show. Go check out Freddie. You're on Instagram too, Freddie Set Go, right?
It's actually, my old website was Freddie Set Go. It's beautifully-broken.world. I'd read it everything Beautifully Broken World. Yeah, beautifully-broken.world is the website. That's all. They have a great store over there with lots of tech in it, lots of discounts and everything, lots of articles and blogs. Everything that, this is my slant especially since COVID. I've tried to take these conversations that are outside of the box, be it castor oil, be it, rebalancing the body's red blood cell magnesium levels or neurofeedback. And I tried to really go in and garnish, like, what does the research say? What's available to us. So a lot of times I'll take an episode or an interview and I'm going to go, great, here are the 14 studies that I found validity to create this working theory, be it red light or PEMF or hyperbaric oxygen, again and again and again. I just want to invite people into the conversation and say, here's what this tool could do for you. Here's the potential. But don't throw it away. Because I'm so aware there's so many people in our spaces and you and I space that are, they're just, it's device after device after thing and claim and new thing and new supplement. It's annoying to me.
I've ran down that path and I'm so over it and I'm with you. It's like, and I always tell people, I'm like, you don't need another hack for anything. I was like, if you can master this thing called your mind, you have unlimited potential. You can do anything. You don't need an Ampcoil. You don't need a new fit device. You don't need any of this crap. If you have the money and you enjoy it and it lights you up, great. But as soon as you buy it, it'll be a thing that'll just sit there and you'll use it for a week and you'll be back to your life. So I know that feeling. And that is the part of the biohacking space that ruffles me the wrong way. Is like, there's no hack for anything is what I've come to terms with. You've got to develop mastery and go deep. And if you're not willing to go deep into these things, you won't get the results you want.
Yeah. We got to do a round two because there's so much in that. I always say it's like, unless, luckily I had my nutrition in alignment. I was understood I needed to be outside. Even though I lived in New York City, I needed to get daylight in my eyes in the morning. I understood that I was going down to the deli and I was like, oh, how can I give my body a hormetic stressor and normalize from the 72-degree box that I live in? I'm going to go get ice from the deli and I'm going to go do my first ice bath, in this old acrylic tub. I was doing things because I was like, my life is so out of alignment with nature. So I was constantly trying to do these things. And one day I was like, oh, I'm making my body cold. I'm making my body warm in a sauna. I'm regulating my circadian rhythm by staring at the sun. I'm writing down moments of gratitude, examining how I communicate and who shows up. Is it the wise adult? Is it the adaptive child? Who's showing up in a conversation? And so those are the big building blocks that you got to have in check. And then when you add a fancy tool, then you're going to get magic. Then you're going to be Grandma Betty who throws away the walker and goes to the Himalayas and be like, oh my God, it's very, they can be synergistic, but I just think don't put so much weight on the things that an influencer is marketing you to have fear around. I don't love electromagnetic fields that we live in the sauce of them, but also I think if you really want to be scared, look at the electromagnetic field off a hairdryer. Don't be worried about it off of your your coffee pot. It's bad, but I understand how it happens. I understand we're trying to break out of the algorithm and we want to be heard. That's it. But, slow down. What makes sense? What is it to have a body that is living in alignment with nature? And why was there a time when we were so free from chronic disease? And why is it skyrocketed today? Ask yourself that question and you come up with your own answers at home.
Yeah. Amazing. Freddie Kimmel. Appreciate you, brother. We'll do
Yeah,
it
buddy.
very soon.